Praise the Lord. I welcome all of you to this Bible analysis class. As you know, now we are traveling through the book of Numbers. And the previous class, I have given you some of the specialities of the book of Numbers. In this class, let us divide the book for the convenience of study, or the structure of the book. How to divide the book for the convenience of study. First of all, look at the book and see that there are 36 chapters. Put together a total of 36 chapters. Now, this book is a book of movement by the people. I told you that they started moving from Sinai to Moab. Moab is the border of the promised land. So, it's a book of journey, and we have to divide the book based on the journey that they took from Sinai to Moab. And also, in the previous class, I was mentioning that one generation passed away and another generation came up. So, this book speaks about two different generations. So, when we divide the book, we have to bear in mind that they were traveling from place to place and there were two generations. Now, keeping in mind these things, we can split or divide the book into three parts: chapter 1 to 14, 15 to 20, and 21 to 36. This is the basic division. First 14 chapters, then 15 to 20, and then 21 to 36. Now, in the first part, that is 1 to 14, we see the old generation traveling from Sinai to Kadesh. Old generation means the generation that started from Egypt. They traveled, they were the dominant group. They started from Sinai and traveled up to Kadesh. Now, when we come to the second part, 15 to 20, we see people being judged by God because of their murmuring and wandering in the wilderness. So, in the chapters 15 to 20, we see the wilderness wandering of people, and this is a time when the old generation died off and a new generation came up. So, this can be called a time of transition from the old to the new. And the third part, 21 to 36, highlights the journey of the new generation from Kadesh to Moab. New generation that came up in the wilderness, traveling from Kadesh and coming up to Moab. So, this is the three parts of the book. And if you divide the book like this, it will be convenient for you to study. Again, I will be giving some more details. Before that, there are some pairs that we can see in the book of Numbers. Let me mention the pairs. There are two generations, there are two numberings, there are two journeys, and there are two instructions, or four pairs, Two generations, two numberings, two journeys, and two instructions. I'll also mention the portions. Two generations, old and new. The old generation is seen in 1 to 14, and the new generation 21 to 36. Two numberings, the old is numbered 1 to 4 chapters, and the new 26 and 27. When you talk about two journeys, the old generation is seen from 10 to 14 and traveling from Sinai to Kadesh, and the new generation 21 to 17, Kadesh to Moab. And two instructions. The first instruction to the old generation is seen in chapters 5 to 9, and the instructions to the new generation is seen in chapters 28 to 36. So, these are the pairs. Now, if you go for a little more details, let us take the first part, 1 to 14, the old generation traveling from Sinai to Kadesh. That itself can be split into three parts. 1 to 4, numbering, chapter 5 to 10 and 10, instructions, and 10, 11 to 14, the journey. So, the first part can be split into three: numbering, instructions, and journeying. Then the second part, 15 to 20, regarding the wandering and transition. Chapter 15 speaks about God's provisions. 16 to 18 speak about the attack on Aaronic priesthood done by the people, and 19 to 20 speak about the death of the old generation. Old generation passing away. Aaron, Miriam, everyone dies off, and Moses is told about his death, etc. And as we travel to the last part, 21 to 36, the new generation traveling from Kadesh to Moab, that can also be split into three. 21 to 25, they are continuing their journey. 26 and 27, the new numbering, 28 to 36, new instructions to be relevant in the promised land, So in the first and last part, numbering, instruction and journeying are there, but the order is different. In the first part, 1 to 14, first numbering, then instructions and then journeying. In the last part, 21 to 36, first journey, then numbering and then finally instructions. So follow this order, you will be able to get to know the details of the book by dividing the book like this. Now some more interesting spiritual lessons to learn from the Numbers. One of the most important things is guidance and deliverance. God teaches how to be guided by God and how to be delivered by God. Guidance means directions from God on journey. Also, already I have told you that we are also on a journey to a promised land and we need to be guided by God. And God says that I will guide you. I will set my eyes on you. I will give instructions and I will guide you personally. So God is willing to guide us, and if God is guiding us, if there is a problem, then God will deliver us also. So guidance and deliverance. To get to know it in a better way, let's take guidance first and then we will go to deliverance. Now when we think about guidance, chapter 9, 17 to 19 is very important. Chapter 9, 17 to 19. Now they were supposed to travel in a new way. Do you remember that? Chapter 10. According to God's instructions, they started the journey for the first time. 10, 13, I've told that in the last class. Now what was the new type of journey? That is, God gave a sign by lifting the cloud and letting the cloud to stop, When cloud lifts, they were supposed to travel, and when the cloud settles, they were supposed to stop. Let me read those verses, chapter 9, 17 to 19. Whenever the cloud lifted from above the tent, the Israelites set out. Whenever the cloud settled, the Israelites encamped. At the Lord's command, the Israelites set out, and at his command, they encamped. As long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle, they remained in the camp. When the cloud remained over the tabernacle a long time, Israelites obeyed the Lord's order and did not set out. And if you read on, you can see that sometimes the cloud remained for a few days, sometimes for a long period of time. And when the cloud lifted from the top of the tent, they were supposed to move. So who was the leader? God himself was guiding and leading these people. Of course, Moses was there as the leader, but even Moses was not sure when the cloud will lift and when the cloud will settle, So based on the lifting of the cloud and the settling of the cloud, they were supposed to travel, and that is guidance, This is the way God guides Christians also. God will deal with us and he will let us know when to move and when to stop, where to go, etc. And if you are moving or traveling according to God's guidance, deliverance is also promised. It is sure. So when we come to deliverance, regarding deliverance, if you are traveling according to God's guidance, you will be delivered. How? Now God explained it like this. Chapter 10 and 9 reads like this. Chapter 10 and 9. When you go into battle in your own land against an enemy who is oppressing you, sound a blast on the trumpet. Sound a blast on the trumpet. Then you will be remembered by the Lord, your God, and rescued from your enemies. So they were given trumpets and they were supposed to sound the trumpet. They were supposed to blast on the trumpet. And when the trumpet is blasted, when the trumpet sounds, God will remember them. God will come down and God will rescue them, redeem them. And again, God will continue to guide them. So when we go according to God's guidance, God will deliver us from the evil and God will lead us through the way according to God's will. So this is one of the basic lessons that we have to learn. Move according to the guidance and get delivered because God wants to give you deliverance. Now let us take each part of the division that we have done, 1 to 14, 15 to 20. I hope you remember that, 21 to 36. Now let's start on chapters 1 to 14, the first part. Now there, I told you that can be split into three: numbering, instructions, and journey. So the first four chapters talk about the numbering, the first numbering. We see God numbering and arranging the tribes, God choosing and assigning duties to the priests and the Levites. Not that our God is a God of order. Why the numbering? Why, arranging the tribes and camping them in a particular pattern? That is just because God is a God of order, not a God of confusion. We read this in New Testament also. If we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 4, 14 and 33, 14 and 40, etc. When we worship and when we follow God, God is not a God of confusion, but God is a God of peace and order. Let me read 1 Corinthians 14:33. God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, or but of order. So God is a God of order and peace. So He wanted the numbers, He wanted the arrangements, and He guided them properly. 1 Corinthians 14 and 40 reads, "Let all things be done decently and in order." So in the church of God also, believers are supposed to do everything decently and in order, because our God is very decent and our God is a God of order. And that is one of the reasons why people were numbered and positions were assigned for every tribe to camp, and the position of the tabernacle, etc. Everything was properly planned by God. Now, why numbering? If you ask why numbering, numbering was for a military purpose. Chapter 1 and 3 makes it clear. You and Aaron are to number by their divisions all the men in Israel 20 years and above, or 20 years old or more, who are able to serve in the army. So numbers was taken for the purpose of serving in the army, and God expects His children to fight against Satan. So we must be soldiers, Census of others were also taken, and positions around the tabernacle was assigned to them. And when they were numbered for the first time, the total number is given in chapter 2 and 32. Chapter 2, 32 gives the total number of people of the old generation, 600,000 and 3,550. That was the total number, 603,550. That was the total number of people counted or census taken at the first time. Chapter 2, 32 gives the number. Now, when we come to the second part of the first unit, that is chapter 5 to 10:10, we see the instructions given by God. The first instruction given by God was regarding the journey, what Israelites must be careful while they worship and while they travel, and all the instructions of God were to be taken into consideration. Now, during the journey from Sinai to Kadesh, what they were supposed to take note of were detailed by God in chapter 5, beginning from chapter 5 and extending to 10 and 10. Now, when we come to chapter 10, we see the people murmuring and rebelling and committing the sin of unbelief, etc. Now, as we travel to chapter 13 and 14, we see their journey, and while they were journeying and while they were getting close to Canaan, spies were sent out to explore the promised land. They set out some spies to go and explore the promised land. Now, after the exploration, the spies brought a report, and that report was placed before the congregation and before the leaders. Now, all the spies who went to explore the promised land, except Joshua and Caleb, brought a discouraging report, a negative report. They told that they saw giants in the promised land. They told that they saw high-walled cities, etc., which were discouraging to them. If I am permitted to read chapter 13, 28, please go to chapter 13 and 28. The people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. These were the comments given by the spies. But then Caleb silenced the people. Caleb and Joshua silenced the people and stated encouragingly, 13:30, "Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." So he had faith. Joshua and Caleb had faith. They brought an encouraging report, but all the other spies brought a discouraging and negative report. But the people would not trust Caleb and they would not trust God. The people were with the majority, they were with the spies who brought a discouraging negative report, and they did not accept the report that was brought by Caleb and Joshua. That means they did not believe the report of God. Now 14:4 reads like this, chapter 14 and 4. They said, let us choose a leader and let us return into Egypt. Look at that. And they say that, let us, now who is the leader of the Israelites now? God himself is the leader, and God is guiding them, and the cloud is lifting, and the cloud is settling, and whenever there is a problem, God is delivering. But now they are stating that, let us choose a leader other than Moses. That is the meaning. And let us return into Egypt. So they wanted to go back. They are remembering the life in Egypt, and they are planning to go back. So it means they lost faith, they lost grip, and they lost opportunity. This is what happens to many believers, losing faith, losing their grip, and losing opportunity. So don't lose your faith. Don't let your faith go away. Don't let your grip go away, and don't misuse opportunities. Now, this can be seen, of course, by 7 murmurings, If you study the wilderness wandering of the people, they murmured 7 times or complained. They were crying, wailing 7 times, which displeased God. In spite of God's provisions, in the last class I have mentioned that God provided food, clothing, meat, water, leaders, promised land, everything, but still complaining, So you should know about, or we must note the 7 murmurings. Chapter 11, 1-3 speaks about their murmuring concerning the way. Chapter 11, 4-10 speaks about their complaint, their murmuring about food. They wanted meat, and they wanted salad, and they wanted fish, everything, They were not satisfied, dissatisfied about food. Then chapter 13, 33 onwards speaks about their complaint, their murmuring about giants in the promised land. Then 16, 2-3 records their murmurings about leaders. That is why they said, we will elect another leader and let us go back. Then 16:41 speaks about their murmuring against divine judgment. They rejected God. So divine judgments were also not welcomed by them. Chapter 20, the first 5 verses speak about their murmurings against the desert. They were tired of the desert. And 21, 4 and 5, their second murmuring about food or manna. So 7 murmurings about the way, about food, about giants, about leaders, about divine judgment, about the desert, and a second time against the food that was provided by God. So God caused them punishment. God caused them judgment because of their unbelief and because of their complaints, their murmurings and their wailings. The wilderness journey was extended to 40 years. Do you know how many days they required to travel from Egypt to the promised land? They required only 11 days, If you calculate it geographically, they needed only 11 days to cover the distance, to come from Egypt all the way over to the promised land. Now, instead of these 11 days, now they were judged by God in such a way that they were supposed to spend 40 years traveling in the wilderness, and all the people who did not believe God dying out in the wilderness. Now, they have to spend their time journeying and getting nowhere. Journeying, but getting nowhere. That was their fate, and that is second part. So that covers the details of the first 14 chapters. Now, when we enter into the second part, that is chapters 15-20, that takes us to the wilderness wanderings of the people and the transition. Now, let's look into that also. Now, during this time of wandering and transition, the first thing that happened, the old generation dies off and a new generation comes up. Old generation means the people who originally started the journey from Egypt. All of them died off, and people who were born during this travel coming up as a new generation. Old generation goes out and a new generation comes up. And among the old generation, only 2 people survived. Only 2 people came forward to complete the journey. And you know the names of those 2. They are Joshua and Caleb. So, here we can see certain important events: the death of Miriam, the death of Aaron, and the others whose names are not mentioned. Go to chapter 20 and 1. There we see Miriam getting dead and buried, chapter 20 and 1. Miriam dead and was buried. Chapter 20 and 28, Aaron died and he was buried on the top of the mountain, Hor. Then chapter 20, 11 and 12, God made it clear that Moses will not go into the promised land because he smote the rock instead of speaking to the rock. Chapter 28, if you read, you will see that. He was supposed to speak to the rock. Instead of speaking to the rock, he smote the rock. So, he was informed that he will not be entering the promised land. So, this is the culmination point. All the others died off. Now, the names of the important people are mentioned. Aaron, Miriam, and Moses was informed that even he will not enter the promised land. So, that brings us a close to the first and second parts of the book of Numbers. Now we have to go to the third part of the book, that is chapter 21 to 36, which we can do in another class. Thank you for your listening. Patiently travel through the book of Numbers and learn how to travel with God and enter into the promised land. May God bless you. Thank you.